Hello, everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. Sweet start to today's topic. Something very special. Something that sounds so simple but actually tells the world who you are. Yes, today we're going to talk about tell me about yourself. You know, I've always believed that the way you introduce yourself says a lot about how confident you are, how clearly you think, and how deeply you understand your own story. Most people get nervous when they hear this question. Whether it's in a job interview, a classroom, a meeting, or even a casual conversation. But what if I tell you that this one simple question can actually open doors to new opportunities, friendships, and dreams? When someone asks, tell me about yourself, they aren't just asking for your name or job. They're asking to see your world, your journey, your energy, your attitude, your personality. And today, I'm going to share my own experience, my own story, how I learned to answer this question not like a robot, but like a real human being. So, before we dive deep into my story, let me ask you two quick questions. First, when someone asks you, tell me about yourself, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Your job, your studies, or your dreams? Second, if you had to describe yourself in just 3 words, what would they be? Drop your answers in the comment box below. I really want to know, because after this story, your answer might change. All right, let's begin. My name is Alex Parker. I'm 27 years old and I live in Austin, Texas. I was born and raised in the United States, but let me tell you, even though English is my first language, I wasn't always good at expressing myself. I could talk, yes, but I couldn't connect. When I was younger, around 15 or 16, I used to be that quiet boy who stayed at the back of the class, avoiding attention. I remember one day in high school, my teacher, Ms. Johnson, asked everyone to stand up and introduce themselves to a new group of exchange students who had come from Japan. Everyone was excited, except me. My heart started racing, my palms got sweaty, and when it was my turn, I barely managed to say, "Hi, my name is Alex." That's it. My voice cracked, and everyone looked at me awkwardly. I sat down wishing I could disappear. That day, I realized something. It wasn't about language. It was about confidence. It was about how clearly I understood myself. Years later, when I started college at the University of Texas, I decided to change that. On the first day of orientation, our professor, Dr. Raymond, asked us all to introduce ourselves in 1 minute. This time, I wanted to sound confident, but not fake. So, I decided to be honest, simple, and natural. When it was my turn, I stood up, took a breath, and said, "Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Parker. I'm from Austin, Texas. I love learning about technology, meeting new people, and understanding how communication changes lives. I'm an easygoing guy who enjoys deep conversations, good coffee, and small challenges that make life exciting." When I finished, the professor smiled and said, "That's exactly how you do it." That one moment taught me the power of being real. You don't have to sound perfect. You just have to sound authentic. Let's pause here for a second. If you've ever struggled with introducing yourself, here's something important to remember. When someone says, tell me about yourself, they actually want you to answer 3 hidden questions. Who are you? What do you do? What makes you special or different? If you can answer these 3 questions in a natural way, you'll leave a strong impression anywhere, in interviews, at social gatherings, or even on a first date. Now let me tell you how I learned to structure my self-introduction in real life. After graduation, I started working at a small digital marketing company in Dallas, Texas. It was my first job, and I was nervous on my first day. During the morning meeting, my manager, Jennifer, looked at me and said, "Alex, since you're new here, tell us a little about yourself." Everyone turned to me. My mind went blank for 2 seconds. And then I remembered my rule. Keep it simple, honest, and interesting. So I said, "Sure, my name is Alex Parker, and I'm really excited to join this amazing team. I recently graduated with a degree in business communication, and I've always loved learning how stories can connect people and brands. Outside of work, I enjoy photography and exploring new coffee shops around Dallas. I believe every picture and every cup of coffee has a story behind it." Everyone smiled. The manager said, "That's a beautiful introduction, Alex." And that's when I knew. It's not about using fancy words. It's about being you. Over time, I refined my way of introducing myself. Whenever I met new people, at a seminar, on a plane, or in a cafe, I noticed something powerful. When you speak about yourself with confidence and emotion, people don't just remember your name, they remember your energy. Let me give you a real example. Last year, I went to Los Angeles for a tech conference. There were people from all over the US, New York, Chicago, Seattle, and even international guests. During lunch, I met a man named Daniel, a startup founder from San Francisco. He smiled and asked me that familiar question. "So, Alex, tell me about yourself." I smiled back and said, "Well, I'm Alex Parker from Austin, Texas. I work in digital marketing, but I'm also passionate about storytelling, especially how brands use emotion to connect with audiences. When I'm not working, you'll probably find me somewhere near nature with my camera or trying new local food spots. I love meeting people who think differently. That's how I grow." Daniel nodded and said, "That's the best intro I've heard today." We ended up talking for almost an hour, and guess what? 2 weeks later, he called me for a freelance project, all because of that one self-introduction. Now let's talk about how you can make your own introduction powerful. Think of your self-introduction as a short story, with a beginning, middle, and end. The beginning should introduce who you are, your name, where you're from, and maybe one simple personal detail. The middle should talk about what you do, your profession, studies, or interests. The end should express your passion or what makes you unique. Here's a small tip. Always add a little personal touch. A hobby, a dream, a funny detail. It makes you memorable. For example, "Hi, I'm Sarah from New York. I'm currently studying psychology because I love understanding how people think. In my free time, I paint abstract art and find peace in colors. My goal is to help people express themselves better." See? That's short, personal, and interesting. When you talk about yourself, avoid sounding like a list. Don't say, "My name is Alex. I'm 27. I live in Texas. I work in marketing." That sounds robotic. Instead, make it flow like a conversation. "Hi, I'm Alex from Texas. I work in marketing, and I really enjoy learning how small details can make a big difference in communication." When you sound natural, people feel comfortable listening to you. You might be wondering, "But Alex, what if I don't have much to say about myself?" Here's my answer. You do. Everyone does. You just have to find your story. For example, talk about where you grew up and what you learned from your hometown, your favorite activity and why it means something to you, a challenge you faced that shaped your personality, or even a simple daily routine that defines your lifestyle. Let me show you how that works in my case. I grew up in Austin, surrounded by music, food trucks, and friendly people. My dad owned a small car repair shop, and my mom was a teacher. I used to help my dad after school, cleaning tools and listening to his stories about customers. I didn't know it then, but those small conversations taught me the importance of communication. Every time I introduced myself later in life, I'd include that small detail. I grew up watching my dad communicate with people from all walks of life, and people loved that, because when you share a piece of your background, it makes you relatable. Now let's talk about body language and tone. Two things that can completely change how your self-introduction sounds. When you introduce yourself, smile. Not a fake smile, a genuine one. Keep your shoulders relaxed, make gentle eye contact, and speak slowly. The goal is to connect, not to impress. If you're talking in an interview, keep your tone polite and confident. If you're meeting new friends, keep it light and friendly. And if you're on camera, like in a YouTube video, imagine you're talking to one close friend, not the whole world. Sometimes people ask me, Alex, how do I make my self-introduction sound unique? I tell them, add your purpose. For example, I could say, I'm Alex Parker. I help people and businesses tell stories that inspire trust and connection. See? That one line shows not just who I am, but why I do what I do. Let's go deeper now, into the emotional side of, tell me about yourself. You see, this question isn't just about facts. It's about identity. When I was 23, I went through a tough time. I lost my job during the pandemic, and for months, I questioned my worth. I'd wake up every morning thinking, who am I without my work? I stopped introducing myself confidently. I avoided conversations. I felt invisible. But then, one day, while walking near Lady Bird Lake in Austin, I sat down on a bench and watched people jogging, laughing, living. And I realized, my identity isn't my job, my degree, or my achievements. It's how I think, how I treat people, how I grow. From that day, whenever someone asked, tell me about yourself, I'd start with my mindset. I'm someone who believes in constant learning. I've failed, learned, and grown. Every experience, good or bad, makes me who I am today. That version of me sounded real, and people connected with that. I learned something very important. Your self-introduction is not a performance, it's a reflection. It's not about using big words, it's about using the right emotions. Quick tips to remember. Be honest. Don't fake stories. People can feel what's real. Be clear. Keep your sentences simple. Be positive. Even if you mention a weakness, show what you've learned from it. Be personal. Add something about your hobbies or dreams. Be prepared. Practice a few lines so you don't freeze when someone asks. So, my friends, now that we understand what "tell me about yourself" really means, let's explore how this simple question changes depending on where you are, who you're talking to, and what kind of situation you're in. You see, I didn't learn this overnight. I learned it through experiences, from interviews to first dates, from networking events to casual chats with strangers in a coffee shop. Every moment taught me something new about how to talk about myself in a way that sounds honest, clear, and human. Let's start with one of the most common places where this question appears. The job interview. 1. Job interview. Dallas, Texas. I still remember my first real interview after college. It was at a marketing agency in Dallas called Bright Wave Media. I walked into a modern glass building holding my resume tight like it was my ticket to a new world. The HR manager, a kind woman named Melissa, greeted me with a smile and said, "Hi, Alex. Before we begin, tell me a little about yourself." Now, this is the moment most people panic. I had practiced my answer for hours, but instead of memorizing lines, I focused on telling my story naturally. So I looked her in the eye, smiled, and said, "Sure, my name is Alex Parker, and I recently graduated from the University of Texas with a degree in business communication. During my studies, I discovered my passion for digital marketing. I love understanding how stories and visuals can influence people's decisions. I completed 2 internships where I helped small businesses grow their social presence. Outside of work, I'm a huge fan of photography and writing, which I think helps me stay creative. I'm really excited about the opportunity to work with Brightwave because your focus on authentic storytelling aligns with what I love to do." Melissa smiled, nodded, and said, "That's a great introduction, Alex. And you know what? That interview changed my life. I got the job." Later, she told me, "We hired you not just because of your resume, but because you sounded genuine and passionate. That's the key. When you tell your story, don't just say facts. Show passion." 2. Meeting a stranger. Coffee shop, Seattle. A few months later, I was traveling in Seattle for work. One morning, I went to a small coffee shop near Pike Place Market, one of my favorite spots in the US. I was editing photos on my laptop when a guy next to me started a casual conversation. He said, "Hey, nice camera. Are you a photographer?" Now, that's another form of "tell me about yourself." It's not a formal one. It's friendly. So I replied naturally, "Yeah, kind of. My name's Alex. I live in Texas, but I travel a lot for my marketing work. Photography's something I do to relax. It helps me see life differently. I like capturing simple moments, like this morning light right here in Seattle." He smiled and said, "Man, that's cool. You've got a great vibe." That's when I realized, even in casual conversations, how you talk about yourself defines the energy people feel around you. So next time you meet someone new, don't rush. Smile, share a bit of who you are, and let your words sound natural. 3. First date. New York City. Okay, let's talk about something fun. Dating. A few years ago, I met someone on a dating app while visiting New York City. Her name was Emily, and she was a teacher in Brooklyn. We decided to meet for coffee at a little cafe near Central Park. She looked at me and said with a smile, "So, Alex, tell me about yourself." I laughed, because even on a date, that question finds you. But this time, I didn't want to sound like I was in an interview. I wanted to sound real. So I said, "Well, I'm Alex, born and raised in Austin, Texas. I work in marketing, but honestly, I'm more of a storyteller at heart. I love exploring cities, taking random photos, and meeting people who see the world differently. I'm simple. I enjoy long walks, good music, and honest conversations." She smiled and said, "That's refreshing. You sound grounded, and that's what makes all the difference. When you talk about yourself with warmth, not with a script." 4. Networking event. New York. Another time, I attended a professional networking event in Manhattan. There were business people everywhere. Everyone was trying to sound impressive. When a man named Jonathan, a tech entrepreneur, came up and asked, "So, tell me a bit about yourself," I noticed everyone else was using heavy business terms like strategic synergy and innovative mindset. But I kept it simple. "I'm Alex Parker. I work in digital storytelling, basically helping brands connect with real people through creative content. I'm passionate about combining marketing with emotion. And outside of work, I love traveling and taking photos. It keeps my creativity alive." He nodded, smiled, and said, "You explain complex things in such a simple way. That's rare." That's when I realized Simplicity attracts respect. You don't have to sound smart. You just have to sound clear. 5. Classroom Introduction, University of Texas. Let's rewind a bit. Back to college days. During my sophomore year at the University of Texas, I had a professor named Dr. Raymond who asked every student to stand up and say something unique about themselves. Everyone said the same things: their name, major, and hometown. When it was my turn, I said, "Hi, I'm Alex from Austin, Texas. I'm studying business communication because I believe words can change how people think. I love photography, writing, and learning about how technology shapes our minds. Oh, and fun fact, I can't start my day without black coffee." The whole class laughed at the coffee part. And suddenly, everyone remembered my name. That's what a small personal detail does. It makes your introduction memorable. So whenever you introduce yourself, in school, at work, anywhere, don't forget to add that tiny spark of personality. 6. Self-reflection. Who are you, really? Now let's go deeper. Sometimes when people ask, "Tell me about yourself," they're not looking for facts. They're looking for your essence. Who are you when you're alone? Who are you when no one's watching? For me, that question changed after I turned 25. I started asking myself, who am I really? I realized I'm not just Alex the marketer. I'm not just a guy who loves coffee and cameras. I'm a human being constantly growing, learning how to be kind, to listen better, to forgive, to stay curious. When I started thinking like that, my introduction evolved. Now when people ask me, "Tell me about yourself," I often say, I'm someone who believes that life is a continuous story. I've made mistakes, learned lessons, and I'm still learning every day. My passion lies in connecting with people and creating something meaningful, no matter how small. That's real. That's powerful, because you're not just sharing your name, you're sharing your soul. 7. Workplace Connection, Chicago. After working for a while, I got a new opportunity to move to Chicago for a corporate project. It was a big team, and the manager asked each of us to introduce ourselves at a team lunch. Everyone started giving formal intros: name, title, department. When it came to me, I decided to keep it real. "Hi everyone, I'm Alex Parker. I just moved here from Texas to join the communications team. Outside of work, I'm passionate about photography, storytelling, and exploring new food places. So if anyone knows where to get the best deep dish pizza in Chicago, please tell me." Everyone laughed. And suddenly, I wasn't just a new employee. I was a friendly person they could talk to. Sometimes, humor or curiosity can make your introduction unforgettable. 8. Self-introduction in everyday life. You know, we often think introductions are only for special moments. But that's not true. You're introducing yourself every day, not just with words, but with your actions. When you smile at a stranger, when you help someone, when you show kindness, that's your silent self-introduction. So, when you answer, "Tell me about yourself," remember, your story started long before that question was asked. 9. The emotional journey. There were also times when I didn't know what to say. I remember one night in San Diego, sitting near the beach, feeling lost after a breakup. I kept thinking about how my story sounded to others, but not how it felt to me. That's when I realized, before you tell others about yourself, you must first understand your own heart. Ask yourself, what are the 3 things I love most about my life? What are the lessons I've learned the hard way? What are the dreams I'm still chasing? When you know those answers, You can tell your story with strength, not insecurity. 10. Final thoughts. Your turn. So, my friends, if someone asks you tomorrow, tell me about yourself, here's what you can do. Start with your name and where you're from. Add what you do, your work, studies, or goals. Then share what makes you different, your passion, your belief, your personality. And most importantly, speak like you're talking to a friend, not an interviewer. When I started doing that, my whole life changed. People connected with me faster. I got better jobs. I made genuine friends. And most importantly, I became comfortable with myself. Because the truth is, the most powerful version of you is the one that's real. So, now I want to ask you something. When someone asks you to tell them about yourself, what part of your life do you choose to share first? Your work or your personality? And if you could rewrite your story today, what new chapter would you begin? Share your answers in the comments. I'd love to read your stories. And remember, you are more than your name, more than your job, more than your past. You are your story. And every word you say adds another beautiful page. Thank you for listening, my friends. This is Alex from Austin, Texas, reminding you that every time you introduce yourself, you're not just answering a question. You're painting a picture of who you are. Speak with honesty. Speak with warmth. Speak like you believe in your story. Because the world needs your story exactly the way it is.